The silence was the most expensive thing Ethan Reed owned. It wasn't the natural quiet of a mountaintop or a deserted beach. It was the engineered, pressurized vacuum of money. 24 stories high in a polished steel and glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The 3/4-inch triple-pane glass muted the city's frantic, screaming symphony into a gentle, meaningless hum. The hum was the only sound accompanying Ethan this December Friday night, 2 weeks before Christmas. He didn't own the building, but he owned the view, and the price he paid for the penthouse office suite ensured absolute, uninterrupted solitude. Below, New York City glittered, a merciless, intoxicating constellation of yellow taxis, red brake lights, and white holiday decorations. Millions of people, millions of stories happening simultaneously, and Ethan, a man of 38 years, was suspended above it all, observing without participating. He ran a hand over the cold, seamless granite of his desk. His company, Nexus Technologies, had just finalized its year-end report. The numbers were staggering. 40% growth, surpassing the most aggressive projections. Ethan Reed was the name on the cover of Forbes, the young, successful, envied entrepreneur. He leaned back, the leather of his custom chair groaning softly, a sound instantly devoured by the vast space. He picked up his crystal tumbler, the ice long since melted, leaving only cold, diluted whiskey. 40% growth, and yet, tonight, the achievement felt like sand slipping through his fingers. For whom was he building this empire? The answer was simple, brutal, and perpetually unanswered. For no one, just for himself. He knew his life was empty. He had acknowledged it 5 years ago after his divorce, a clean, contractual separation that felt more like a merger failure than the end of a relationship. He had chosen this, organizing his existence to eliminate need, eliminate risk, eliminate connection. His apartment 10 blocks away was less a home and more a gallery of minimalist high-end furniture, a showroom designed for a magazine cover. He had mastered the art of absence. Ethan reached for the stack of paperwork his executive assistant, Chloe, had left for him before she, like everyone else, retreated into the promise of the holiday weekend. Stock options, quarterly earnings summaries, a few invitations to black-tie galas he would promptly decline. He worked mechanically, the highly trained brain of a CEO reducing complex financial documents to patterns and logic. He believed only in patterns, logic, and causality. It was amidst the crisp, laser-printed sheets that a foreign object surfaced. A small envelope, wrinkled and slightly sticky, slipped from the middle of the stack and fluttered onto the polished granite. It was made of cheap paper, the kind used for children's drawing pads, and featured a crude, hand-drawn Christmas tree in the corner, colored with a faded green crayon. Ethan frowned. This was not corporate mail. It bore no logo, no return address. The recipient line, scrawled in an exaggerated, clumsy script, was addressed simply to Santa Claus, North Pole. He hesitated. He should simply toss it. A mistake, probably the child of a custodian or an overly enthusiastic employee. But something about the utter innocence of the drawing and the determined sloppiness of the handwriting made him pause. The simplicity was arresting, a break in the sterile perfection of his world. Before he could rationalize the action, Ethan's long fingers tore open the side of the envelope. He pulled out a folded sheet of notebook paper. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope. Large, uneven letters, clearly labored over. He read the words once, then twice. The 24 stories of silence seemed to deepen, pressing in on him. Dear Santa Claus, my name is Lily, and I am 7 years old. I know you are very busy bringing presents to all the kids. I don't want toys this year. My mommy works too hard, and she's tired. She says I am the biggest gift she could ever have, but I see she gets sad sometimes, especially when the other kids at school talk about their dads. I don't have a dad. My mommy says he left before I was born. Please, Santa, can you send me a father? He doesn't have to be perfect. He just has to like us, one who stays. Thank you, Lily. Ethan sat down, the letter trembling almost imperceptibly in his hand. A 7-year-old child asking Santa for a father, not a gaming console, not a new bike, not sweets. A father, someone who would simply stay. He stared at the small drawing at the bottom of the page. 3 stick figures, a woman, a girl, and a vacant spot beside them where a man should be. In that vacant spot, Lily had drawn a shaky crayon question mark. The sheer, devastating simplicity of the request hit him with a force that none of his quarterly reports ever could. When was the last time he had been genuinely touched by anything? He couldn't remember. He felt a sting of emotion that felt foreign, dangerous. He looked around the cold, silent office. His massive wealth, his formidable influence. It all suddenly felt useless. He had the power to acquire entire companies, yet here was a problem that could not be solved by a bank transfer or a signature. He had to know. He needed to understand the causality behind this absurdity. He picked up his phone and took high-resolution photos of the letter and the envelope. Then he stored the originals carefully inside a sealed file folder and placed it in his safe. He didn't wait for Monday. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Chloe's number. He stared at the screen, aware of how strange this call was. It was almost 10:30 at night, and he never called his assistant off hours unless the market was crashing. He hit the call button. Chloe answered on the second ring, her voice tight, likely expecting a catastrophic financial emergency. "Mr. Reed, is everything all right?" "No, Chloe. I need you to tell me how a letter addressed to Santa Claus ended up on my desk tonight." His voice, though controlled, carried an unusual edge of urgency. There was a long silence on the other end, a silence far more significant than the one provided by his triple-pane windows. "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Mr. Reed, I'm so sorry. It was a mistake, a silly mistake." Chloe sounded genuinely mortified, a rare break in her professional composure. "A mistake, I understand. Explain the causality of the mistake." Ethan needed facts, logic, a pattern to grab onto. Chloe sighed, the sound crackling through the phone line. "On Friday morning I had to bring my niece to the office. Her school had a burst pipe, and they released the children early. My sister Sarah was teaching and couldn't leave. I brought her here, and she sat at the reception desk for a few hours." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Lily, she was drawing and writing. She showed me the letter she wrote to Santa. I thought it was sweet, and I put it aside to read later, maybe show Sarah. When I was organizing your documents for the weekend, I must have accidentally clipped it with the contracts. I only realized my error late Friday, but you were already gone." Chloe's voice was filled with self-reproach. Ethan felt a strange calm wash over him. It wasn't random chance. It was Chloe's niece. The connection was immediate, human, and inescapable. "Your niece," he repeated, the words tasting foreign. "What is her name?" "Lily Harrison. She's 7. She lives here in New York, in Queens." "And the mother, Sarah, tell me about her." Chloe hesitated. "Mr. Reed, why are you asking this?" "Because I read the letter, Chloe. I read every word. Now tell me about Sarah." "Sarah is my older sister. She's a middle school teacher. She raises Lily completely on her own. It's complicated. Lily's father left when Sarah told him she was pregnant. He was cruel about it, said she ruined his life. He disappeared completely, never looked back." Ethan absorbed the details. Sarah, the single mother, the proud teacher, the abandonment. And Lily, 7 years old, writing a desperate, simple request to a mythical figure because the pain of her mother and the gap in their family were too large to ignore. He thought of his own father, a man who was physically present but emotionally colder than the Manhattan winter, perpetually more interested in balance sheets than in his son. He had promised himself he would never be like that man, and instead he had chosen complete absence, achieving the same result: emptiness. "You're close to them?" Ethan asked. "Very. Lily is like my own daughter. I help out where I can. Sarah is too proud to take money, but I try to contribute subtly." Ethan leaned forward, his reflection in the dark window a flawless image of control, but his eyes betrayed a profound disquiet. "I need to meet them, Chloe. Lily and Sarah, I need to understand." Chloe's sharp intake of breath was audible. "Mr. Reed, meet them? Why? They are not a merger opportunity. They are not a social project. I know what they are not. I don't know what they are. But that letter, it made me realize that I have everything and nothing all at once. I'm asking you to facilitate this, not as my assistant, but as Sarah's sister. The silence returned, heavy with the weight of her decision. Finally, Chloe spoke, her voice lower, infused with a fierce protectiveness. I will talk to Sarah, but she is going to be suspicious. She has every reason to distrust men, especially wealthy strangers who show sudden interest. Her whole life has been about protecting Lily from that kind of instability. I expect that. What are her conditions? She will have conditions. I will call you tomorrow after I've spoken with her, but listen to me, Ethan. Chloe used his first name, a boundary crossed, signaling the seriousness of the situation. I have worked for you for 6 years. You are the most driven and, frankly, the most emotionally unavailable man I know. My niece is not a way for you to fill a weekend or a fleeting void. If you are not absolutely certain that you can be present, that you will not disappear when this stops being novel, I need you to quit now, for Lily's sake. The blunt challenge was exactly what he needed. No excuses, no corporate jargon, just raw truth. I cannot promise perfection, Chloe, Ethan said, his voice measured but certain. I cannot promise I won't stumble, but I can promise this. If I start, I will not disappear. I'm tired of living a life based on escape. Tell Sarah that. Tell her I need to try. Chloe was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the faint hum of the city 24 stories below. All right, Ethan, I'll call you tomorrow, but if you hurt them, I will ensure you regret it. Fair enough. Ethan ended the call. He put the phone down gently, as if handling something fragile. He was breathing heavily, his heart pounding not from effort, but from the simple, terrifying act of committing to something purely emotional. He walked over to the massive window and looked out. The city lights seemed brighter now, less meaningless. He wasn't just observing the constellation of human stories anymore. He was about to jump into one. He picked up the file folder containing the letter and tapped it lightly against his palm. One who stays. He had spent his entire adult life being the one who left, the one who avoided, the one who built walls. Now, a 7-year-old girl's simple wish, delivered by an administrative error, was demanding he learn to stay. The weight of that challenge was heavier than any acquisition deal he had ever closed. And for the first time in years, Ethan Reed felt an urgent, terrified sense of purpose. He packed his briefcase with documents he knew he wouldn't read. As he prepared to leave the cold, quiet sanctuary of his office, he thought of Lily's question mark drawn in the empty space beside the stick figures. That question mark was now the most important item on his agenda. He had 24 hours to prepare for a meeting that could either finally break his isolation or reinforce his belief that human connection was a risk too great to take. He decided he would start by asking Chloe where he could buy something casual that didn't look like an expensive corporate costume. The Armani suit felt too much like armor, and he knew that to face Sarah and Lily, he would have to face them unarmed. He shut down the office lights. The darkness enveloped the penthouse, but inside, Ethan Reed, a small, incandescent spark of fear and hope, had finally ignited. He left the building, the cold December air hitting his face. He wasn't sure if he was stepping out of his office or out of his old life. Ethan Reed spent the next 24 hours in a state of suspended animation, a condition utterly foreign to a man whose life was dictated by schedules, projections, and control. He was waiting, not for a market report or an acquisition target, but for a simple phone call from Chloe. His luxurious penthouse, a haven of controlled temperatures and muted colors, felt suddenly vast and mocking. He attempted to read the files he had packed, but the columns of figures and legal jargon blurred, the words holding no significance against the backdrop of one single phrase: one who stays. The call came just before noon on Saturday. Chloe's tone was tight, professional, yet clearly protective. "Ethan, I spoke to Sarah," she began, bypassing pleasantries. "It went exactly as I expected. She is not happy. She thinks this is bizarre, invasive, and potentially dangerous." Ethan braced himself, standing by the expanse of glass that offered a view of the icy East River. And the conditions? She agreed to one meeting, one single chance, and only because I vouched for your sanity. Barely. But she has rules, Ethan. 3 of them. Chloe's voice was crisp as she laid out the non-negotiable terms. Rule number 1. The meeting must be casual, in a public, neutral setting, nothing formal that makes Lily uncomfortable or suspicious. She needs to think you are just a friend of mine. Understood, Ethan confirmed. Rule number 2. If at any point Sarah feels you are disingenuous, manipulative, or if you violate her boundaries, if she senses a lie, she will walk away, and you will never attempt contact again. She means it. No attempts to leverage your position or mine. Agreed, Ethan said, the severity of the commitment settling over him. He was entering a negotiation where he held all the perceived power, yet was completely subject to the judgment of the opposing party. Rule number 3, and this is the most critical. You do not mention money, financial help, charity, or anything that remotely smells like pity. Sarah is a professional. She is fiercely proud, and she has survived on her own for 7 years. If you treat them like a project to be funded, it ends instantly. I accept all 3 conditions, Ethan said without hesitation. It was the easiest decision he had made all week. These were not obstacles. They were necessary gates of entry. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon, a local Christmas fair and choral performance at the public elementary school where Sarah taught. Lily, Chloe explained, was singing in the 2nd grade choir. Ethan hung up and stared at his reflection. He was wearing the new, non-Armani clothes he had reluctantly acquired, dark denim jeans and a simple grey sweater over a white collared shirt. He looked younger, less armored, and terribly exposed. He felt an intense, dizzying mix of dread and anticipation. He had spent his life controlling variables. For the first time, the variables were completely human, completely unpredictable. Ethan navigated his high-end vehicle through the busy, narrow streets of Queens, an urban landscape utterly foreign to his Manhattan sensibilities. The houses were close together, colorful, imperfect. There was noise, laughter, music from open windows, children playing, a vibrant, messy energy that was the inverse of his ordered existence. He parked 3 blocks away, a deliberate choice to avoid drawing attention with his expensive car. He walked the remaining distance, the December air sharp and clear, carrying the smell of roasting nuts and cheap pine decorations. The school was an old brick structure, painted a cheerful, slightly faded yellow. A handmade banner reading Happy Holidays spanned the gate. Families poured inside, parents bundled in winter coats, children bouncing with excitement. It was chaotic, loud, and felt entirely real. He saw Chloe first, near the entrance. She was talking to a tall woman whose brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Even from a distance, Ethan knew it was Sarah. There was a posture of readiness about her, a silent, defensive set to her shoulders. As Ethan approached, Chloe spotted him and gave a nervous, almost imperceptible nod of warning. Sarah turned. Sarah Harrison was not what he had expected, nor what he had perhaps stereotyped. He had imagined someone defeated by hardship. Instead, the woman who faced him possessed fierce, intelligent brown eyes and a striking natural beauty that exhaustion had not diminished. She wore a modest but neat floral dress and boots, and her expression was pure assessment. She was strength personified, a mother who had fought for 7 years and was prepared to fight 7 more. Ethan extended his hand, his movement automatic, corporate. "Sarah, I'm Ethan Reed. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Her handshake was firm but brief and immediately withdrawn. "Chloe explained the situation," Sarah said, her voice low and even, betraying no emotion. She didn't smile. "It remains difficult to comprehend, Mr. Reed, why an extremely wealthy, well-connected stranger would show interest in my daughter because of a piece of misdirected mail." Ethan chose his words carefully, discarding his practiced corporate pitches. "I know it sounds absurd. Believe me, I am questioning it myself. But that letter, Sarah, it wasn't just a child's wish. It was an absence, defined. I understand absence. My own life is full of it. I came because I felt compelled to understand. Sarah crossed her arms, a classic protective posture. Her scrutiny was clinical, searching for the lie, the flaw in the narrative. You have no children. You've admitted to a profound isolation. You believe we are some kind of antidote to your personal crisis. Her questions were brutal, precise. I don't know what you are, Ethan admitted honestly. I only know what I am. Empty. I am not here to use you as a project. I am here because I read her words, one who stays, and I realized I've spent my life running. Maybe I need to learn to stay too, if you'll let me try to learn. The sheer, unexpected honesty of his reply visibly surprised her. Sarah looked toward Chloe, seeking confirmation, and Chloe offered a small affirmative nod. All right, Sarah finally conceded, the word heavy with reluctance. You may meet her, but remember the rules. If Lily is uncomfortable, if she looks at you sideways, we are done. I will not compromise my daughter's stability for your curiosity. I understand and accept. They walked into the crowded school gymnasium, which was serving as the auditorium. The air was thick with the scent of popcorn, sweat, and cheap coffee. The walls were covered with construction paper decorations and dozens of children's drawings. The cacophony was a sensory overload for Ethan, yet he found himself oddly grounded by the sheer, unfiltered humanity. Sarah guided them toward a row of seats near a makeshift stage. Lily is backstage with the choir. They'll be on in 5 minutes. A young teacher took the crackling microphone, and soon 24 children, all wearing oversized red t-shirts and ill-fitting Santa hats, filed onto the stage. Ethan scanned the faces until he saw her. Lily. Small, dark hair pulled into 2 bouncy pigtails, serious brown eyes, and the crooked Santa hat that kept slipping over her forehead. She stood near the center, visibly nervous, but determined. Sarah whispered beside him, her voice softer now, tinged with maternal pride. That's her, the one adjusting her hat. The choir began to sing a slightly off-key rendition of Silent Night. Ethan could not take his eyes off Lily. That was the girl whose powerful, simple plea had cracked open his carefully constructed life. She sang with earnest concentration, her small face radiating effort. When the song ended, the applause was deafening. The children scrambled off the stage, searching for their parents. Lily found Sarah immediately and raced into her arms. "Mommy, did you see? I didn't forget the second verse." Sarah knelt, hugging her tightly. "You were perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." It was then that Lily noticed Ethan. She looked up at the stranger, her large, serious eyes traveling from his sweater to his face, assessing him with the unnerving, direct candor of a 7-year-old. "Who is he?" Lily asked her mother. Sarah took a deep breath. "Lily, this is Ethan. He's Chloe's friend. He came to see your school." Ethan knelt instantly, a reflexive move that surprised him. He found himself at eye level with the small, pivotal figure. "Hi, Lily. You sang wonderfully. Very brave." Lily offered a shy, gap-toothed smile. "Thank you. I was nervous." "It didn't show," Ethan replied. He wasn't talking down to her. He was simply engaging. Lily tilted her head. "Are you a teacher too?" "No. I work with Chloe." "Are you nice?" The question was so direct, so lacking in filters, that Ethan couldn't help but let out a genuine, unforced laugh, a sound he hadn't heard himself make in years. "I don't know. I'm trying to be," he answered. Lily seemed to consider this, then shrugged, accepting the answer. "Okay, do you want to see my drawing? It's on the wall." Before Ethan could respond, Lily took his hand. Her small hand was warm and surprisingly confident. She pulled him toward the wall, where dozens of student artworks were tacked up. Ethan allowed himself to be led, feeling the unprecedented, powerful pull of that tiny hand. Sarah watched them, her posture still rigid, but her eyes held a spark of surprise. Lily stopped in front of a colorful poster featuring a lopsided Christmas tree. "This is mine. Me and Mommy opening presents." Ethan studied the drawing. 2 smiling stick figures, Lily and Sarah. "It's beautiful, Lily. You're very talented. Do you have kids?" she asked, repeating the question Sarah had posed earlier, but this time it carried a heavier weight. "No, I don't," Ethan said softly. Lily looked pensive. "Why not?" Ethan swallowed, searching for an honest answer that wouldn't sound like a corporate failure. I haven't met the right people yet." Lily nodded sagely, as if that explained everything. "Chloe says the right things happen at the right time." "Your Aunt Chloe is wise," Ethan agreed, smiling. Lily let go of his hand and ran back toward her mother. "Mummy, can I have a cookie, please?" Sarah nodded, her expression unreadable. She walked toward Ethan as Lily ran off toward the refreshments table. "She likes you," Sarah said quietly, still assessing. "Lily is not like that with strangers." "She's special," Ethan stated, knowing he spoke an absolute truth. "Yes, she's everything to me." Sarah looked him directly in the eye, the challenge renewed. "You got your look, Mr. Reed. You've met her. You saw the school. You can satisfy your curiosity now." Ethan stood his ground. He looked from Sarah to the small, vibrant girl selecting a cookie at the table, then back to the intense woman standing before him. "I don't feel satisfied, Sarah. I feel like I just opened the door to a world I never knew existed, and I want to see what's inside. Your conditions allowed me to meet you. Now, I'm asking for permission to try to understand you." Sarah's silence stretched, a tense moment suspended amidst the holiday chaos. Then, to Ethan's surprise, a faint, almost imperceptible ghost of a smile touched her lips. "My sister mentioned something about you needing to learn to stay," she murmured. "We'll see if a man who had everything can learn the value of something he can't buy." She didn't tell him to leave. She only walked away to supervise Lily, leaving Ethan standing alone, but feeling less solitary than he had felt in his office 24 stories above the world. He had passed the first test, but the true challenges, learning to be present, confronting their past, and proving he wouldn't run, were only just beginning. He knew that for Sarah Harrison, gaining her trust would be the most difficult acquisition of his life. The first few weeks following the school fair were defined by tentative, almost scientific caution. Sarah had allowed Ethan a narrow path into their world, and he navigated it like a foreign terrain, constantly mindful of the tripwires of pride and past hurt. Their meetings were restricted to public parks and libraries in Queens, always supervised by Sarah, and often punctuated by Lily's infectious, unfiltered enthusiasm. Ethan, the man who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without blinking, found himself utterly awkward, trying to engage a 7-year-old in conversation about the merits of strawberry ice cream versus chocolate. His initial attempts, asking generic questions about school or offering expensive toys he thought Lily might want, were met with polite, bored monologues. It was only when he stopped trying to acquire her interest and simply started listening that the dynamic shifted. He learned that Lily was intensely curious about the night sky, terrified of thunder, and had an unwavering opinion that mismatched socks were a sign of true bravery. Ethan, absorbing these tiny, precious details, realized he was learning more about genuine human existence than he had in the entire 18 years he'd spent building his career. He discovered the sheer weight of presence. He wasn't paying for entertainment, he was simply being there. This simple fact was what disarmed Lily, and more importantly, what began to chip away at Sarah's formidable defenses. She watched him, in the park, trying and failing to push Lily high enough on the swing set, or kneeling to examine a shiny pebble Lily had found, and the ice in her eyes slowly thawed into a mixture of intense scrutiny and reluctant wonder. The true turning point arrived 3 weeks after their first meeting, when Sarah finally extended a guarded invitation for Ethan to visit their home. "Chloe insists you've been behaving," Sarah stated over the phone, her voice carrying an exasperated amusement. "And Lily is starting to ask why her Aunt Chloe's friend only ever wants to meet us next to the frozen yogurt stand. You can come Sunday for lunch. No gifts, no fuss. Just be normal, whatever that means for a corporate type like you." The Sunday visit felt like traversing a boundary more significant than crossing the East River. Ethan parked his car several blocks from Sarah's street, a neighborhood of close-knit homes, front porches, and murals painted on fences. The house itself was small, 2 stories with a postage stamp lawn. It was modest, but the interior radiated a warmth that assaulted Ethan's senses. The air smelled richly of fresh coffee, baking bread, and the faint, sweet scent of cinnamon. Lily's artwork, bright crayon masterpieces, was pinned to the refrigerator and framed haphazardly on the living room walls. The whole house spoke of a life being lived, not curated. Ethan's penthouse felt sterile by comparison. He recognized the feeling that gripped him, envy, not of the house, but of the heat it contained. Lily greeted him with an unrestricted hug that surprised him again with its natural ease. She immediately dragged him to her bedroom, a small space painted lilac, filled with books, unicorn bedding, and well-loved stuffed animals. "Mommy says I have to donate some of these," Lily announced, pointing to a shelf crammed with toys. "But I love them all." Ethan surveyed the collection. There were no extravagant items, but every toy bore the marks of constant affection. Torn seams, worn edges, pages bent from repeated reading. He instantly calculated how easily he could replace every item in the room, then just as quickly dismissed the thought. That would be a violation of rule number 3. It would be a betrayal of the effort Sarah had poured into this life. Sarah served lunch at the small kitchen table, roasted chicken, rice, and beans. Simple, nourishing, and made with care. Ethan realized it was the first proper home-cooked meal he'd had at a table with other people in years. There was conversation, gentle arguments over Lily, attempting to hide her vegetables, and the easy rhythm of a family unit. He caught himself watching Sarah as she cut Lily's chicken into smaller pieces, a gesture so natural and tender it tightened his chest. After lunch, Lily, fueled by a sugar cookie, ran off to play in the backyard. Sarah brought out a stack of papers and a red pen. "Third-grade math homework," she announced, sitting at the kitchen table. "If you're going to observe, you can observe my reality. I'm grading these." Ethan, without thinking, pulled a chair beside her. "Do you mind the company?" "I mind if you talk about your quarterly reports," she countered, leveling her gaze at him. "Do you even remember third-grade math?" "I remember enough to check the work of a 9-year-old, Ethan said, picking up a paper. "And if I don't, I learn. I've been doing a lot of that lately." They fell into a comfortable domestic silence, broken only by the scratching of their pens and the distant sound of Lily's play. Ethan found a profound, unexpected satisfaction in the shared task. It was routine, unglamorous, and utterly meaningful. After about half an hour, Sarah placed her pen down and looked at Ethan, her gaze penetrating. The moment he knew was inevitable had arrived. "I need the real answer, Ethan," she said, her voice low, ensuring it wouldn't carry to the backyard. "Why are you truly here? I accepted your story about the emptiness, but I need to understand what a man like you wants from a family like ours." Ethan set aside the papers. He knew this conversation could end everything, but he owed her complete honesty. "I have spent my entire life building things," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I built a company from nothing. I built a reputation, a fortune, a fortress, but I never built anything that mattered. I never built connection. I never let anyone in." Sarah waited patiently, her expression unreadable. "I didn't think I needed anyone. I certainly didn't think I deserved anyone. I convinced myself that this fortress, my solitude, was strength." He paused, looking at the drawings of Lily taped to the fridge. "When I'm in my penthouse, I feel like I'm an abstraction. Here, I feel real. When I'm with Lily, when I'm next to you, I remember who I was before I became successful." "And you think we can fill that void?" Sarah asked, her tone lacking accusation, only genuine curiosity. "No," Ethan admitted, shaking his head. "I'm not here to use you as a personal redemption project. I am here because, for the first time in years, I feel the urge to stay. I feel hope, and if being near you two helps me find my way back, I will accept whatever label you give this." Sarah absorbed his words in silence. The defense mechanisms Ethan had watched her deploy over the past weeks seemed to falter. "And if it doesn't work," she pressed, her voice trembling slightly, "if you realize this life is too messy, too far from your spreadsheets, and you decide to leave? Lily is already attached, Ethan. She talks about you during the week. If you disappear, it won't just hurt her. It will confirm every cynical lesson she's ever learned about men. Her brutal honesty was a reminder of the stakes. This wasn't about his money or his time. It was about the heart of a 7-year-old girl who had already been discarded once. "I won't disappear," Ethan stated. It was a promise made not to Sarah, but to the memory of the cold, absent father he himself had endured. "I know you have no reason to believe me. I know Lily's father made promises and broke them all. But I am not him, Sarah. I don't make promises I can't keep. And I am promising now, I am not abandoning Lily. I am not abandoning you." Sarah held his gaze, her fierce brown eyes searching for any flicker of deceit. After a long moment, she simply nodded, the slightest hint of relief softening the tension in her jaw. "I want to believe you," she admitted quietly. "It's just difficult to trust again." "I know," Ethan said, "and I'm not asking for your trust today. I'm asking for the chance to earn it, slowly, on your terms." They returned to correcting the math papers, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. There was a new sense of quiet acceptance, a fragile partnership forged in vulnerability. As the afternoon light began to fade, Lily came running back inside, her energy depleted. She curled up on the small sofa, watching a movie while Ethan and Sarah finished grading. Ethan knew he should leave before nightfall. He stood up, whispering, "I should go." "Thank you for today," Sarah murmured, walking him toward the door. "Thank you for trying." At the doorway, Ethan took her hand, covering it with his own, a fleeting, significant touch that was neither corporate nor familial, but something new entirely. "Thank you for letting me try." He stepped outside into the early December dusk. He looked back at the warm yellow light spilling from the simple windows. He got into his car, but he didn't start the engine. He simply watched the house, a monument of fierce, complicated and beautiful life. Later that week, the stakes escalated. Chloe called him on Wednesday with the news. "Lily asked Sarah a question after you left," Chloe relayed. "She asked, if Ethan is Chloe's friend, why does he come here to do homework instead of going to cool New York places?" "What did Sarah say?" Ethan asked, bracing himself. "She told Lily you were different. Then Lily asked if you would be there for Christmas." Ethan held his breath. Christmas. A day he usually spent alone, surrounded by delivered food and optional work. "Sarah said she didn't want to pressure you, but she didn't want to say no either because she didn't want to disappoint Lily. She left the choice entirely to you." Ethan looked at his calendar. Christmas Day. He was scheduled for a mandatory, though purely ceremonial lunch with a major investor. A commitment he'd made months ago, purely out of obligation. "Tell Sarah," Ethan said, the words clear and unwavering, "that I will be there. Tell her to save me some of that good coffee." The commitment was now total. He was choosing the chaotic, warm reality of Sarah and Lily over the sterile, expected demands of his empire. He was choosing presence over profit. He was choosing to stay. The journey was accelerating, leading irrevocably toward the simple, messy climax of Christmas Day. The week leading up to Christmas Day felt less like the approach of a holiday and more like the inevitable arrival of destiny. Ethan Reed cancelled the formal investor lunch without a second thought. His carefully constructed life of professional obligation had suddenly crumbled under the weight of one 7-year-old girl's simple, written wish. The silence of his penthouse was now replaced by the internal monologue of anticipation. He dedicated time not to market analysis, but to choosing gifts that honored rule number 3. No extravagance, only intention. He remembered Lily's fascination with the night sky, buying her a detailed collection of illustrated books on astronomy. For Sarah, Chloe had mentioned her sister's quiet passion for art, which she never indulged due to cost. Ethan found a professional set of watercolors, high quality but modest in presentation. They were gifts chosen by a man who had finally learned to see. Christmas morning arrived with the pale, mild chill typical of a New York City December. Ethan dressed carefully in his acquired casual clothes, the jeans and sweater now feeling less like a disguise and more like his genuine uniform. He felt none of the dread that usually accompanied the holiday. Instead, he felt a nervous, exhilarating lightness. He arrived at Sarah and Lily's house just after 10 o'clock, his hands slightly damp as he touched the doorbell. Lily flung the door open, wearing a new red dress, her pigtails bouncing, her eyes shining with pure 7-year-old excitement. "Ethan, you came!" She leaped into his arms, and Ethan caught her effortlessly, the automatic, loving gesture reinforcing how much his instincts had changed. He lowered her, exchanging a look with Sarah, who stood just behind Lily. She was wearing a simple cotton dress, her hair loose, and she looked breathtaking, radiant with the warmth of her home. "Good morning," Sarah said, her voice warm, though still carrying a subtle layer of apprehension. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," Ethan replied, his hand briefly touching hers as he passed the carefully wrapped gifts to Chloe, who was already in the kitchen helping prepare breakfast. The fleeting contact was charged, an unspoken current that neither acknowledged but both felt acutely. The house hummed with enchanting simplicity. The small artificial Christmas tree glowed with cheerful mismatched lights. The air was rich with the scent of French toast, fresh coffee and holiday anticipation. The morning unfolded in a series of perfect, messy moments. Shared breakfast, Lily tearing open her gifts with squeals of joy, the astronomy books instantly capturing her attention. Sarah blushing deeply as she unwrapped the watercolors, insisting he shouldn't have spent so much, yet her eyes betraying a profound, heartfelt gratitude. Ethan's own gift from Lily was a drawing, neatly framed, the 3 stick figures from the initial letter, but now the question mark was gone. In its place stood a tall, smiling figure, him. All 3 figures were holding hands under a bright yellow sun. A knot tightened in Ethan's chest. He was included. He belonged to that picture. Mid-afternoon, after the remnants of wrapping paper were cleared, Chloe announced she needed to leave, inventing a hasty excuse about a forgotten item back home. Both Ethan and Sarah knew she was creating space for the inevitable conversation. Lily, exhausted by the morning's excitement, finally dozed off on the sofa. Sarah and Ethan gravitated toward the small, quiet back porch, where the sky was turning a heavy, promising shade of grey. They stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the distance between them less than a foot, yet a lifetime of unsaid things still separated them. Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper, thick with accumulated emotion. "I have to tell you something, Ethan." Ethan turned fully toward her, his own heart hammering against his ribs. "When Lily's father left, something inside me didn't just break, it fractured. It wasn't just the rejection. It was the way he did it, as if I were a mistake, as if our daughter was an unwanted burden," she began, staring out at the darkening yard. "I swore I would never again give anyone the power to hurt me like that. For 7 years, I kept that vow. I closed my heart. I focused only on Lily, on surviving, on being strong enough for 2. Ethan listened, understanding that this was not a conversation, but a confession, a necessary cleansing before any truth could be shared. "Then you showed up," Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly, "with your absurd story about a misplaced letter. I thought you would tire, that you were just temporary curiosity, that in a few weeks you'd realize this life is too hard, too small, and you'd disappear like everyone else." She finally looked at him, her beautiful eyes wet with unshed tears. "But you didn't disappear, Ethan. You kept showing up. You learned how to make pancakes because Lily mentioned she liked them. You spent hours looking up astronomy books. You look at my daughter as if she is precious, as if we are precious." She paused, fighting for control. "I'm in love with you, Ethan Reed, and it terrifies me. Because if you walk away now, you won't just break Lily's heart, you will break mine completely." The moment was the culmination of 4 chapters, of 38 years of running, of 7 years of fierce protection. Ethan didn't think, he simply acted. He closed the small distance between them and pulled Sarah into his arms, enveloping her in a fierce, protective embrace. She surrendered instantly, burying her face against his chest. her silent tears soaking his sweater. He kissed the top of her head, murmuring into her hair, "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I'm not leaving you. I'm completely in love with you, with Lily, with this life you have shown me. You saved me without even knowing it. You saved me from an existence I called life, but which was nothing more than an empty space." Sarah lifted her face, her eyes red, but glistening with determination. "Are you sure? This isn't just romance, Ethan. This is waking up early to get Lily to school. This is dealing with tantrums and homework struggles. This is sharing space and time and life. It is real and messy and difficult." Ethan smiled, wiping the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. "I want all of it. I want the early mornings and the homework battles. I want to share this space with you. I want to build something real, something that matters." Sarah searched his eyes for any trace of doubt or fear. She found only certainty. Then she smiled, a shaky, genuine smile that cracked the last of her emotional armor. Ethan leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to retreat. She didn't. Their lips met in a gentle, profound kiss, weighted with all the unspoken promises of their future. When they finally separated, both were breathless, smiling. Sarah rested her forehead against his. "This is insane," she whispered. "It is the best kind of insane," Ethan replied. They walked back inside, their hands tightly interlocked. They found Lily awake, rubbing her eyes. She looked at their joined hands, and her face lit up with immediate, innocent understanding. "Are you dating?" she asked directly. Sarah laughed, still wiping away traces of tears. "Yes, my love, we are." Lily scrambled off the couch and hugged both their legs. "I knew it. I asked Santa, and he sent you." She looked up at Ethan, her large eyes serious once more. "You're going to stay, right?" Ethan knelt, holding her small hands. "I am staying, Lily. Forever, if you'll have me." Lily didn't answer with words. She threw herself into his arms, clinging tightly. Ethan held her close, Sarah kneeling beside them, wrapping both of them in her embrace. In that small, warm living room, in that simple house in Queens, Ethan found everything he had spent his life searching for: belonging, family, home. A gentle rain began to fall outside, tapping softly against the window pane. Later that evening, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, Ethan and Sarah sat on the front steps, their shoulders touching. "What happens now?" Sarah asked quietly. Ethan took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Now we build slowly, on our own terms, on our own time. I want to earn Lily's trust completely. I want you to be absolutely sure of me." "I am sure," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "It just took me a long time." "Then we will take it slow," Ethan confirmed. "I will be here whenever you need me. I will be here even when you don't. I will stay. That is my promise." Sarah leaned her head onto his shoulder. "You know my life is complicated, right? Low income, demanding job, a daughter who needs constant attention." Ethan laughed softly, a sound now freely given. "Sarah, I used to spend 80 hours a week in meetings about spreadsheets. Your life is not complicated. Your life is real, and it is exactly what I need." He stood and pulled her up for a final kiss, a long, deep promise of the future. "Merry Christmas, Sarah," he whispered against her lips. "Merry Christmas, Ethan," she replied, smiling. Ethan drove back to his penthouse under the freshly washed, star-strewn sky. But his apartment was no longer home. Home was that small house, colored with crayon drawings, overflowing with love. Home was with Sarah and Lily. He had believed he needed wealth and power to conquer the world. But a 7-year-old girl, writing a letter asking for a father, one who stays, had shown him the one thing he couldn't buy: purpose. They hadn't needed his salvation. They had been his. And now, together, they would build a true family, imperfect, messy, and absolutely theirs.